When I found my newborn daughter in a hospital dumpster, wrapped in medical waste bags, I thought she was dead. But then, she moved, just the tiniest flutter of her fingers, and my 7-year-old stepson whispered the words that would destroy my marriage forever. "Mommy, I knew they'd do it again, just like they did to my real mommy's baby." My name is Delphine, and 48 hours ago, I thought I had a perfect life. A successful husband, a sweet stepson who'd finally started calling me mom, and a baby on the way. Garrett seemed like everything my first husband wasn't: stable, devoted, from a good Christian family who welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Nadine, always said I was the answer to their prayers, that God had sent me to heal their family after the tragedy of Garrett's first wife dying in childbirth. I should have paid attention to how Quincy flinched whenever his grandmother hugged him. I should have noticed how he never wanted to be alone with his father. I should have questioned why a 7-year-old boy knew his way through the back corridors of a hospital, why he knew exactly where they dump medical waste, why his little hands didn't shake when we searched through biohazard bins looking for my baby. "She's here somewhere," he kept saying, his voice so calm it terrified me. "They always put them in the red containers. Grandma says red means medical waste that goes to the incinerator. We have maybe an hour before the truck comes." How does a child know that? How does a 7-year-old boy know the disposal schedule for medical waste? Because he'd been here before, searching for another baby, his own sister, though he'd been too young and too scared to save her. The security footage would later show everything. My husband Garrett walking beside Dr. Hendricks as they wheeled my daughter out of the delivery room, telling me she'd died when she was actually crying. It would show my mother-in-law Nadine directing them to the waste disposal area, checking her watch, calculating how long until the removal service arrived. It would show them returning to my room, arranging their faces into masks of grief, Nadine clutching her Bible as she told me this was God's will. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that my stepson, this quiet boy who'd lost his mother and sister, was pulling me through the freezing October morning in nothing but my hospital gown, blood still running down my legs from giving birth, because he refused to let them take another baby. "Quincy," I gasped, struggling to keep up, "how do you know where to look?" He turned to me with eyes too old for his face. "Because last time I followed them. I watched where they put her. I heard her crying for 20 minutes before she stopped. I was 4 years old and I couldn't lift the lid by myself. But I'm bigger now, and you're here. You're not scared of them like my real mommy was." That's when I heard it. A weak, mewling cry from inside a red container, marked for incineration. My daughter Violet, born with a cleft palate and shortened arms, who my husband's family had decided wasn't worthy of life. She'd been in there for 3 hours, wrapped in surgical drapes like garbage, but she was fighting. Even then, barely hours old, she was fighting to survive. The rest of that morning broke apart my entire world. The arrests, the investigation, the revelation that my husband's family had been doing this for years. 11 babies with disabilities who had died at birth, all delivered by the same doctor, all from families in Nadine's church congregation. They called it mercy, returning God's mistakes back to heaven before they could burden their families. But the worst revelation came when Quincy, sitting in a police station wrapped in a blanket, finally told the truth about his mother's death. She hadn't died from complications during childbirth. She'd tried to stop them from taking her baby, and they'd silenced her permanently. My husband had helped murder his first wife, and his 7-year-old son had been carrying that secret ever since. This is the story of how a little boy saved my daughter's life and exposed a decade of murders disguised as acts of faith. It's about the monsters who hide behind church pews and medical degrees, and the children who see everything but are never believed until it's almost too late. My daughter Violet is alive today because Quincy refused to let another sister disappear. He'd been waiting 3 years for someone strong enough to listen, someone who wouldn't be scared into silence. He chose me, and together we brought down an entire network of people who believed that imperfect children didn't deserve to live. But first, I had to find my baby in a dumpster, and that's where this story really begins. I married Garrett Morrison 2 years ago in a ceremony his mother Nadine planned down to the last ribbon on the church pews. She chose the flowers, white roses, because purity matters in second marriages too, she'd said, with that smile that never reached her eyes. She selected my dress, insisting on sleeves to cover the small tattoo on my shoulder from my rebellious college days. Even picked our wedding song, a hymn about submission and grace that made my skin crawl. But Garrett squeezed my hand and whispered, "Just let her have this. It's easier." That should have been my first warning. It's easier. I was 27 then, a pediatric nurse who'd just escaped a marriage to a man who thought his fists could solve arguments. Garrett seemed like salvation wrapped in a Southern accent and a successful real estate development firm. He was patient, gentle, never raised his voice. His 7-year-old son, Quincy, needed a mother, and I needed to believe I could build something beautiful from broken pieces. "Quincy's special," Garrett told me on our third date. "He hasn't spoken much since his mother died. The trauma of losing her during his sister's birth, it changed him." The boy was indeed quiet, but his silence felt deliberate, not damaged. He watched everything with those deep brown eyes, cataloging conversations, memorizing exits. When I moved into their colonial house in the historic district, Quincy tested me in small ways. He'd leave his toys in specific patterns to see if I'd move them. He'd pretend to be asleep to see what I'd say about him. He was studying me, determining if I was safe. The breakthrough came 6 months after the wedding. I was planting a vegetable garden, something Garrett said his first wife had wanted but never got around to doing. Quincy appeared beside me, holding a packet of tomato seeds. "My mommy wanted to grow these," he said, the longest sentence he'd shared with me. "Then we'll grow them together. Want to help?" We worked in silence for 20 minutes before he spoke again. "You don't pray before you do things." "Should I?" "Grandma says we should pray about everything. Mommy used to forget sometimes. That made Grandma angry." "What made your mommy happy?" Quincy thought carefully, his small hands patting soil around a seedling. "When Daddy was at work and Grandma was at church, she'd dance in the kitchen and let me lick cookie batter. She said our secret times were the best times." Over the following months, Quincy revealed his mother, piece by piece. Claire had been 23 when she married Garrett, a church secretary who caught the attention of the congregation's most eligible bachelor. She loved musicals, hated casseroles, and cried when she found out she was pregnant the second time. "She was scared," Quincy told me one evening while Garrett was at a business dinner. "She said the baby might come out wrong because of what happened to her sister when she was little." "What happened to her sister?" "She was born different. Grandma Claire said they sent her away to a special place, but Mommy found out there was no special place, just a certificate that said she died." My blood chilled, but I kept my voice steady. "That must have scared your mommy. She tried to run away once. Daddy brought her back. Grandma made her take medicine after that to help her think clearly." The family dynamics became clearer as my pregnancy progressed. Nadine controlled everything through weaponized concern. She'd arrive unannounced with groceries because pregnant women shouldn't strain themselves. She scheduled my prenatal appointments with Dr. Hendricks, insisting he was the only doctor who truly understands God's plan for childbirth. Vernon, my father-in-law, existed as a shadow, nodding along to whatever Nadine declared. "You're so much stronger than Claire," Nadine told me during my 7th month, organizing my kitchen cabinets without asking. "That girl was fragile, always crying about something. Quincy needs stability, not hysteria." "How did she actually die?" I asked directly. Garrett just says complications. Nadine's hands stilled on my dishes. "Sometimes God calls mothers home to spare them from raising children who would suffer. Claire hemorrhaged after delivering a severely deformed baby girl. The child lived 10 minutes. It was merciful for both of them." But Quincy had told me different stories. His sister had cried. His mother had screamed for them to bring her baby back. Then his mother went quiet and they said she was sleeping, but she never woke up. By my 8th month, I understood I'd married into something dark masquerading as light, but I thought I could protect my baby. I thought being aware was enough. I was wrong. Labor started at 3 a.m. with a sharp pain that shot through my spine like lightning. I reached for Garrett in the darkness, finding his side of the bed empty and cold. He was standing by the window, fully dressed, his phone already in his hand. "It's time," I gasped. "I know, Mom's on her way." "You called your mother before checking if I was okay?" She insisted on being notified immediately. You know how she is about family births. Nadine arrived within 10 minutes, perfectly coiffed despite the hour, carrying a leather bag I'd never seen before. Vernon followed like a silent sentinel. "How far apart are the contractions?" she asked, not looking at me but at Garrett. 5 minutes, I answered for myself. "Dr. Hendricks is already at the hospital preparing," she announced. "Everything will be perfect." The ride was surreal. Nadine sat in the back with me, timing contractions on an old stopwatch while muttering prayers under her breath. "Lord, grant us acceptance of your will. Help us understand your plan even when it seems cruel." "Why would God's plan be cruel?" I asked between contractions. Her hand tightened on mine. "Sometimes he tests us with burdens we're not meant to carry, dear." At the hospital, everything moved too fast. Dr. Hendricks appeared immediately, though I'd never seen him move with such urgency during regular appointments. 2 nurses I didn't recognize from my unit wheeled me straight to delivery. "Where's Sarah?" I asked about my colleague who'd promised to be there. "She's supposed to be on tonight." "Staff changes," Dr. Hendricks said smoothly. "We have specialists for your situation." "What situation?" "Everything's been normal." Another contraction cut me off. They pushed medication into my IV without explaining what it was. The room began spinning slightly, sounds becoming muffled. Through the haze, I heard Nadine whispering to Garrett, "If it's like the ultrasound showed, we need to be prepared to act quickly." "The ultrasound showed possible markers," Garrett replied. "Nothing definitive." "Claire's ultrasounds showed nothing, and look what happened. We can't make the same mistake twice." At 6:47 a.m., Violet was born. I heard her cry, strong and clear before I saw her. Then the room went silent. The nurses stepped back. Dr. Hendricks held her up, and I saw my daughter's bilateral cleft palate, her shortened arms, the way her fingers curved differently. But I also saw her fighting, her legs kicking, her voice demanding to be heard. "She's beautiful," I breathed, reaching for her. "There are severe complications," Dr. Hendricks said, pulling her away. "She needs immediate intervention." "Let me hold my baby." "Oh, Lord, not again," Nadine gasped, clutching her pearls. "How could this happen twice?" "What do you mean, twice?" My voice was getting thick from whatever they'd given me. Vernon finally spoke, his voice hollow. "Nadine, perhaps we should—" "Should what?" she snapped. "Pretend this is normal? That child will suffer every day of her life. It's cruel to force her to endure that." "She's breathing fine," I insisted, fighting to stay conscious. "Her cry is strong. Those are good signs." "You're emotional and drugged," Dr. Hendricks said coldly. "Let us make the medical decisions." They wrapped Violet hastily, her cries muffled by too many blankets. I saw Quincy in the doorway, his face white as paper. He was supposed to be with the neighbor, but there he stood, watching everything. "Daddy?" His voice was small. "You promised you wouldn't do it again." Garrett knelt beside his son. "Go back to Mrs. Patterson's house, Quincy. Now." "But the baby. Now." It was the first time I'd heard Garrett raise his voice. Quincy ran, but not before our eyes met. In that look was a message: be ready. They wheeled Violet away while I fought against the medication pulling me under. Through the fog, I heard them in the hallway. Nadine's voice was clear, authoritative. "It's God's way of testing us. These defective ones aren't meant to survive. We learned that with Claire's baby. Mom, Delphine won't accept." "She will. They always do eventually. And if she doesn't, well, we've handled that before too." "I can't lose another wife." "You won't. Delphine's stronger than Claire. She'll understand this is mercy. The paperwork's already prepared. Dr. Hendricks knows what to write." The last thing I heard before unconsciousness took me was Nadine saying, "Take it to the usual place. The removal service comes at noon. God forgives us for correcting his mistakes." When I woke 3 hours later, they told me my daughter had died. The room was dark when I woke, my body heavy with whatever sedatives they'd pumped into me. A nurse I didn't recognize was adjusting my IV, avoiding eye contact when I struggled to sit up. "Where's my baby?" "I'll get the doctor," she said, practically running from the room. Dr. Hendricks arrived with papers already in hand, Garrett trailing behind him like a shadow. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm deeply sorry. Your daughter's internal complications were more severe than we detected. She passed away at 8:15 a.m. That's impossible. My voice came out stronger than I felt. She was crying. Her lungs were strong. I'm a pediatric nurse. I know what a healthy cry sounds like. The emotional trauma is affecting your memory. Dr. Hendricks pushed the papers toward me. We need your signature for the disposition of remains. I want to see her. That's not advisable. The body has already been processed. Processed? The word hit me like ice water. It's been 3 hours. No funeral home works that fast. Garrett finally spoke from his corner. Delphine, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Where is Nadine? She's in the chapel, praying for our daughter's soul. That's when I noticed Quincy standing in the doorway, his school backpack still on his shoulders. Mrs. Patterson must have brought him despite Garrett's orders. His eyes were red but determined. While Garrett and Dr. Hendricks focused on me, Quincy mouthed a single word. Now. I need to use the bathroom, I announced. You should use the bedpan, the nurse suggested. You're still recovering. I'm using the bathroom, I said, swinging my legs over the bed despite the pain shooting through my abdomen. Unless you plan to physically restrain a patient, which I'm sure the medical board would love to hear about. Dr. Hendricks backed away. 5 minutes. The nurse will assist you. I can manage alone. The moment they left, Quincy darted to my side. Mommy, she's not dead. I heard her crying when they took her outside. Outside where? The loading dock, where the medical waste goes. They did the same thing with my sister. We have to hurry. The truck comes at noon. I looked at the clock. 11:23 a.m. Quincy, are you absolutely sure? His small face was fierce. I followed them this time. I saw which container, the red one marked for incineration. I put a rock under the lid so she could breathe. This 7-year-old boy had thought of everything. I ripped out my IV, ignoring the blood that immediately spotted my gown. We're going to need help, real help. My teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, is married to a police officer. I have her number in my backpack. You brought your teacher's number? I've been carrying it since Mommy died, in case I ever got brave enough to tell. I grabbed his phone and dialed while pulling on the hospital robe backwards for more coverage. Mrs. Rodriguez answered on the second ring. Quincy, is everything okay? This is Delphine Morrison, Quincy's stepmother. I'm at St. Catherine's Hospital. They've told me my baby died, but Quincy says she's in the medical waste container. Please send your husband. Send everyone. There was a pause. Then her voice came back, steel hard. We're 8 minutes away. Get to that baby. Quincy grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door. The hallway was mostly empty, the lunch shift change working in our favor. He led me through a stairwell I didn't even know existed, his small feet confident on the steps. How do you know this route? I explored everywhere after Mommy died. I wanted to know all the ways out in case they came for me. My heart shattered for this child who'd spent 3 years planning escape. Routes. We emerged into blazing daylight behind the hospital. The loading dock was 50 feet away, industrial dumpsters lined up like sentinels. The red biohazard containers were segregated in a locked cage, but Quincy pulled out a keycard. Where did you get that? Doctor. Hendricks drops it sometimes when he thinks no one's watching. I made a copy at the hardware store. The man there didn't ask questions when I said it was for a school project. Inside the cage, 4 red containers sat waiting for disposal. Quincy went straight to the second one, where indeed a small rock propped the lid open just enough. Inside, wrapped in surgical drapes and clear medical waste bags, was Violet. Her lips were blue, her body cold, but when I pressed my fingers to her throat, I felt the faintest pulse. She was alive. My baby was alive. Run, I told Quincy. Get to the ER entrance, scream for help, tell them everything. I burst through the emergency room doors with Violet clutched against my chest, her tiny body barely moving. Blood from my torn IV site had soaked through my hospital gown, leaving a trail behind me. Help! Someone tried to murder my baby. Dr. Martinez, who I'd worked alongside for 3 years, dropped the chart she was holding. Delphine? What's happening? They told me she died, but she was in the medical waste. She's hypothermic, barely breathing. Please. The ER erupted into controlled chaos. Dr. Martinez took Violet from my arms while barking orders. Get warming blankets, heated IV fluids, continuous monitoring, core temp stat, and someone call security and the police now. Within seconds, Violet was surrounded by the real medical team, not the carefully selected staff Dr. Hendricks had assembled. Her temperature was 91 degrees. She'd been in that container for over 3 hours, but she was fighting. The monitors showed a weak but steady heartbeat. Delphine, what happened? Dr. Martinez demanded while working. Dr. Hendricks and my husband's family, they took her because she was born with deformities. Said she died, but they threw her away like garbage. Security footage, someone said. We need to pull everything from this morning. Detective Coleman arrived within minutes, followed by 2 other officers. Behind them, Mrs. Rodriguez entered with her husband, Officer Rodriguez, and Quincy holding their hands. The boy's face was set with determination I'd never seen before. Ma'am, we need to take your statement, Detective Coleman began, but Quincy stepped forward. I saw everything, he announced, and not just today. I've been watching them for 3 years. The room went silent except for the beeping of Violet's monitors. They killed my mommy, Quincy continued, his voice clear, and my baby sister, and they were going to keep doing it. Detective Coleman knelt beside him. That's a very serious accusation, son. I have proof. Quincy opened his backpack and pulled out a notebook, the kind children use for school, but inside weren't multiplication tables or spelling words. Page after page contained dates, times, conversations he'd overheard, sketches of the hospital layout, and names. So many names. October 15th, 2021, he read. Grandma told Mrs. Henley that her grandson's Down syndrome was God's punishment and offered to help with the arrangement. November 3rd, 2021. Baby Henley died at birth. Nobody asked why. Garrett arrived then, flanked by Nadine and Vernon, all looking perfectly composed as if arriving for a normal visit. The moment Garrett saw the police, his face went white. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. Nadine started, her church voice smooth as silk. My daughter-in-law is confused from the medication. Postpartum psychosis runs in families, you know. Is that why you were caught on security footage directing the disposal of a living infant? Detective Coleman asked. The security chief had arrived with a laptop, turning it toward us. The footage was crystal clear. There was Garrett, wheeling a bassinet beside Dr. Hendricks. There was Nadine, checking her watch, pointing toward the waste disposal area. The timestamp showed 7:23 a.m., when they'd told me Violet had been dead for over an hour. That's not what it looks like, Garrett stammered. Then explain what it is, Officer Rodriguez challenged. But Quincy wasn't finished. May 18th, 2020. My mommy tried to call 911 when they took my sister. Grandma stopped her. My mommy fell down the stairs that night, except she didn't fall. I saw Grandma push her. Nadine's composure finally cracked. You lying little brat, you don't know what you saw. I know you told Daddy that Mommy was going to ruin everything. I know you gave her extra medicine in her juice. I know she was trying to leave with us the day she died. Detective Coleman stood slowly. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Hendricks, when he arrives. You're all under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Mrs. Morrison Sr. will be adding murder charges pending investigation. This is ridiculous, Nadine shrieked. We were doing God's work. Those children were abominations. They would have suffered. So you decided to play God, Dr. Martinez asked, still working on Violet. How many babies, Nadine? How many? Vernon, who'd been silent, suddenly spoke. 11. There were 11 over the past 10 years. I have records. I kept them all. Everyone turned to stare at him. I'm not brave like this boy, he said, looking at Quincy. But I kept records hoping someday someone would stop her. I'll testify. I'll give you everything. Nadine lunged at her husband, but the officers restrained her. You weak fool, you never understood. We were saving those families from lives of burden and shame. No, I said, standing despite my legs shaking. You were murdering children who didn't meet your standards of perfection. Violet's cry suddenly pierced the room, weak but insistent. She was warming up, fighting back, proving that she deserved every breath. Violet is 2 years old now. She says mama with a voice that sounds different because of her cleft palate, but it's the most beautiful sound in my world. She's had 3 surgeries already, with more planned, and she uses adaptive equipment for her arms. When she laughs, which is often, the whole room lights up. She's proof that perfection isn't about meeting someone else's standards, but about being exactly who you're meant to be. The trial made national headlines. Church family murdered disabled infants for decade ran across every major newspaper. Garrett got 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. He never once looked at me during the proceedings, just kept mumbling about how his mother said it was God's will. Nadine got life without parole after they connected her to Claire's death and the 11 infants. The investigation revealed she'd been pushing families toward mercy killings since before Garrett was even married, building a network of believers who thought disability was divine punishment. Dr. Hendricks lost his medical license and faces multiple murder charges. 17 years he'd been delivering babies and deciding which ones deserved to live. The hospital faced massive lawsuits, policy overhauls, and federal oversight. 3 nurses who'd been complicit were also arrested. The entire obstetrics department was restructured. Vernon testified for the prosecution, providing boxes of evidence he'd hidden in a storage unit. Phone recordings, emails, even video he'd secretly taken of Nadine discussing her ministry of mercy. He got 5 years as an accessory, but will probably serve 2. "I was a coward," he said at sentencing. "I let fear of my wife override my conscience. Those babies died because I stayed silent." Quincy is 10 now and lives with me as my legally adopted son. The custody hearing took 5 minutes once the judge heard his testimony. He goes to therapy twice a week, working through trauma no child should carry. His therapist says he shows remarkable resilience, but I see the moments when shadows cross his face. He still checks exits when we enter buildings. He still keeps important phone numbers written in 3 different places. He still sometimes stands guard outside Violet's nursery at night, making sure no one takes her. "You saved her," I tell him every day. "You're a hero." "Heroes aren't scared," he told me last week. "I was scared the whole time." "No, baby. Heroes are scared and do the right thing anyway. That's what makes them heroes." We moved to Oregon, as far from Georgia as we could get while staying in the continental U.S. I work at a children's hospital now, specifically in the unit for babies with complex medical needs. Every child who comes through deserves fierce advocacy, and I make sure they get it. Quincy wants to be a detective when he grows up. Says he wants to help kids who can't speak for themselves. I think he'll be brilliant at it. The network Nadine built crumbled after the arrests. 3 other churches were investigated. 4 more doctors scrutinized. 16 suspicious infant deaths reopened as murder cases. It was a cancer that had metastasized through the whole community, hidden behind prayers and potluck dinners. They'd convinced themselves that murdering imperfect babies was somehow holy, that they were saving families from hardship and children from suffering. But suffering isn't about having a disability. Violet doesn't suffer because of her cleft palate or her arms. She suffers when people stare at her like she's wrong. She suffers when other parents pull their children away at the playground. That's not her disability causing pain, it's other people's prejudice. Claire, Garrett's first wife, had tried to stop them. She'd figured out what happened to her sister years before and threatened to expose everyone. So they silenced her, made it look like complications from childbirth, and kept her son as a witness they thought was too young to remember. But children remember everything, especially trauma. They just need someone to believe them when they finally find the courage to speak. I learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear pearl necklaces and lead Bible study. Sometimes they have medical degrees and warm smiles. Sometimes they're the person who promised to love and protect you. Evil doesn't announce itself with horns and pitchforks. It comes disguised as concern, as tradition, as God's will. But I also learned that heroes come in unexpected forms. A 7-year-old boy who kept evidence for 3 years. A grandfather who finally chose justice over family loyalty. A baby who refused to die despite 3 hours in freezing conditions. Love isn't about perfection. It's about fighting for someone's right to exist exactly as they are. If this story touched you, please share it. Comment below about the heroes in your life who stood up when it mattered. And subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival, justice, and the unexpected courage of ordinary people facing extraordinary evil. because these stories need to be told. Silence is how they got away with it for so long, but not anymore.